Good evening, everyone. I am Lisa Morgan, a kindergarten teacher and the current president of the Georgia Association of Educators.
I'm Sharon Doe. I'm a physics teacher in Augusta, Georgia, and I'm the current GAE Vice President.
And I'm Carly Shaw, and I'm the current Secretary Treasurer of GAE. I teach physical science in Fulton County.
And I'm Joe Fleming. I'm the Legislative Director for the GAE at the state capitol.
So last Wednesday, Joe, was Sine Die. And so that's Georgia. We now have everything the legislature can do for the current session has been done. So Joe, tell us what happens next with those bills and when do they take effect? That's something that hadn't been talked about a lot. When will they be effective?
So I'll start with that first. Different legislation is written different ways. Some bills become law on when the governor signs them. They literally become law then. Most bills, I would say, have a July 1st effective date, which is when the new fiscal year begins for the state, and the new school year, of course, begins. So most of them will have a date of July 1st for effective date. Some others are January 1st of next year. These are generally bills that require particular backroom effort to get things up and running. For example, if they changed the procurement code for computers for the state of Georgia, it might take several months to get that up and running. So that bill could have a January 1st effective date. And then there are rare bills that have an effective date into the future, depending on some of those are sometimes contingent upon court action or federal government action, things of that nature. But for our purposes, most of the bills that we're dealing with that affect education and public education that will be before the governor, if he signs them, would go into effect on July 1. Now, the session ended last Wednesday. It actually ended early Thursday morning, if you want to be literal about it. The House adjourned probably about 12:15 to 12:20. So it was a late night at the Capitol. The governor has 40 days to sign or veto legislation. Some states have some states have laws that say that if a governor does not sign a bill, then it's automatically vetoed. In Georgia, it's the opposite. If the governor chooses not to sign a bill, then it automatically becomes law. And there are examples in history where a governor has not signed a bill knowing that it would become law because he had some objection to a part of the bill, but felt like the overall purpose of the bill was in line with what he or she, well, there's been no she, so what he would want to accomplish. So 40 days from Wednesday last Wednesday puts us about May 10th. So Lisa and I and Grace are going to be meeting with the governor's staff coming up shortly to talk about some of the bills that we're interested in either having the governor veto or sign. First among those is the voucher bill that we've talked a lot about this session. There were actually 4 voucher bills introduced this session. There was House Bill 60 in the House, which would have created an entirely new third voucher program based on kind of an educational savings program that would be funded by state taxpayers in the state of Georgia. That bill we beat. It never had the votes, largely because of our great grassroots effort.
Our members.
Yeah, our members deserve all the credit. Because their emails and phone calls really made a difference and made it extremely difficult for the proponents of that bill to get the majority that they needed. So it came really close to coming to the floor for a vote several times. When a bill leaves committee, for example, the Education Committee, it goes to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee is it's kind of the gatekeeper committee for legislation, and they also set which legislation will be allowed to the floor for a full vote. So HB 60, the House voucher bill, was in rules 3 times at least, scheduled for a floor vote and then pulled back because, again, the votes weren't there for it. So kudos to our members for responding to the call when asked. It made a big difference. There was another voucher bill in the Senate, SB 47, which is an expansion of the existing special needs voucher program. That bill passed the Senate, and in committee in the House was changed, in my opinion, not in a way, in a significant way, but it was changed, and that change alone, regardless of what it was, allowed the proponents to claim that any problems that we had in the education community were fixed or addressed. And we lost an important Republican ally in that vote, who personally believed that the bill had been pared back enough for him that he was comfortable actually introducing or guiding the bill through the House. That was a critical factor, a critical point in the debate over the Senate bill. That ended up passing. We had 11 Republicans vote with us, 3 Democrats voted against us, and the bill passed with the majority it needed in the House. The Senate concurred with the Senate changes, so that bill is going to the governor. And we'll be asking the governor to take a strong look at that bill and pointing out what we think are some serious flaws, fatal flaws with that legislation. For example, in the voucher bill that passed, there are no caps or limits. There's no limits on the number of students that can take advantage of this program. There's no limit to the amount of money the state could spend on this program, which is really it's an open-end blank check. And the current program has no accountability or transparency what to speak of, really. I mean, there's very little that's required to be reported to the Department of Education or the General Assembly. We think that we've got a potential bipartisan coalition that we're working with for next year to add accountability and transparency to that existing special needs scholarship, and as it's amended by the bill that passed this year. So, I mean, this is state appropriated money that essentially is going to private schools with very little accountability. As I said, there's no real reporting about how the money's being used, whether students are progressing academically, that household income that of the families that are utilizing this. And the current program and the bill have no means testing whatsoever. So if you live in a $10 million home on West Paces Ferry, you qualify as easily as somebody who lives in Thomasville Heights, which is wrong-headed, I think, in our thinking. If you're going to have a program like this, it ought to go to the people that most need it. So that's one piece of legislation we'll be talking to the governor about. Let me just characterize the session with a few other points. Of course, every year the General Assembly has to adopt a budget for the next fiscal year. Again, that starts July 1st. So the 2021-22 budget was adopted. Unfortunately, it's got $400 million in cuts to QBE and the Department of Education. They also went in and adjusted the current year budget, which originally proposed a $1 billion cut for education, and pared that down to a $400 million cut. So either way, we're taking cuts this year and next year, significant dollars, I would point out too. And we want to reiterate with the governor and legislators in the off season that getting that funding back is not only a constitutional responsibility of theirs, but it's something that we expect. The other thing that we expect, based on the promises that we've been given, is the additional $2,000 pay raise for teachers. 2 years ago, teachers got a $3,000 pay raise, with the promise by Governor Kemp of another $2,000 before he stood for re-election. So I think next year, I expect him with no problem to introduce a $2,000 pay raise through the General Assembly. that will meet that commitment. So
Expect to do that too.
I- it's good
Go
to
ahead.
hear that, but here's what I'm going to say. Are you going to be bought by $2,000?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's happened before. Joe, I don't believe in coincidence, but it seems like every time there's an election, that's the year that we get a raise as teachers. I remember, I don't know if y'all remember this. We got Sunny Money, and you got that $100 debit card in the mail.
My furlough days.
Yeah, we were having furlough days, but you got a $100 debit card in the mail to buy supplies. And sorry, that didn't. If you're going to support public education, you need to support public education every year, not just an election year.
Yeah. So, and there are plenty of things that can be worked on that, so, you know, I've written about this, but the session is really not noted for a great session for public education. The General Assembly seemed more fixated on shiny objects like homeschooling and private school vouchers and things of that nature. And a belief underscored much of the legislative process that public schools are overfunded right now, that we've got too much money, which is of course kind of silly. There is federal money coming, but it's COVID related in how it can be spent. So, but we spent, and Lisa was there, and if you watched any of the hearings on a number of different bills, it was often said that they were just swimming in cash, which is, again, I think you talk to any administrator or school board member, they would beg to differ.
Well, you know what I miss? I miss the tax-free weekends because I have kids who still go to school.
Yeah.
And I miss those tax-free weekends.
I do too. Several years ago, the General Assembly was on a kick to try to eliminate tax deductions. Of course, they didn't eliminate many of the giant tax breaks that corporate America gets, but they did eliminate the sales tax holiday back to school, which didn't really cost the state that much, but I thought it was kind of a nice thing that people could depend on, and the retailers liked it a lot too.
Well, a lot of teachers took advantage of that because we would take that opportunity to buy up a whole bunch of stuff for our students for the upcoming school year.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Joe. Have you heard of the governor planning to veto any of the past legislation?
Any of the bills that we've talked about so far? No,
Well,
they're pretty close. They play things pretty close to their vest. In some cases, you won't know the vetoes until the last of the 40 days that he has to sign or veto. So, you know, I don't have any reliable information to make a guess on what he might, but we have an obligation to our members to represent our members' position on legislation all the way through the process. Yeah. And the part where the governor comes in is a critical part of that process. So, no, but I don't have any guesses that I'd feel comfortable making.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to ask you about a bill because someone else has said this passed, and I know this is something that we were working on at the very end, and it's one of the voucher things. House Bill 517, that was to add transparency requirements to the state tax credit for private schools. Did that actually pass?
It appears not. The Senate in the last literally minutes of the last day of the session passed House Bill 517, and House Bill 517 is a bill that it's bitter and sweet at the same time. The bitter part is that it raises individual and corporate contributions to school scholarship organizations that administer the tax credit that people can get for sending their school kids to private school. The sugar part of it for us anyway was that the bill was the first education bill I can think of this session and last year that really had some meaningful accountability to it, and could be a model of accountability for other legislation that goes in the future. So, you know, part of us was really not comfortable with raising the caps on the contribution for private school scholarships that, again, the state funds. But the transparency piece was noteworthy. Anyway, it passed the Senate in the last minutes of the General Assembly. For some reason, the House, I don't know if it was intentional or they ran out of time or it was an oversight, but it was not passed. And a lot of us thought initially it had. And at the beginning of this discussion, I mentioned there were 4 voucher bills. The 4th voucher bill was similar in the sense that it would raise the state cap on how much the state spends for these private school tax credits that you get. I think it's $100 million a year that the state can spend now on these tax credits. But there was
for the rich.
Yeah. There was a bill to raise it to 150, and that was a fascinating hearing in and of itself, because that's where a lot of stuff came up about how flush we are with money. But that bill did not pass. It did not get out of committee, which is a good sign. I would assume that our opponents on the voucher issue would be back pushing that bill next year. So that remains to be seen. But we're going to have our own legislation to actually make things right when it comes to vouchers. I don't think on the special needs voucher that we could get a majority to eliminate the special needs scholarship as it stands now, but we sure ought to be able to get some reasonable accountability there. The other thing I want to make sure we mention, Lisa, because I've gotten several phone calls and emails from GAE members about it, is the $1,000 bonus that you mentioned earlier. The Board of Education did adopt that on March 25th. I've been told by DOE that the money is starting to flow. It is possible that some teachers have already gotten their $1,000 bonus. I think Sharon, did you say? I think you said you got one, and Lisa did. So if you've not gotten it, it's coming soon. And poor Carly has not gotten hers, so check your mail tomorrow. But it really literally should be coming soon. Now, the money's going to the district, and every district might have different ways of distributing the money. Some districts are doing their own bonuses as well, or have done them on top of that. So it gets a little confusing, but I would say if by the first of next week you have not received a check, let us know, and we'll check on what's going on with your school district. But the money is flowing. It is subject to tax, and I guess districts are taking the tax part out of that. It is treated as taxable income. But and Lisa, I know you brought this up, so I'll give you the credit for it. Apparently, TRS won't be getting any of that money. So I don't know if you want to amplify on that or not.
I think TRS said because it's one time that they aren't considering it part of our regular income. So for everyone that's wanting more money in their pocket out of that bonus, that's a good thing. However, if an educator is considering retiring this year, that $1,000 will not count toward the calculation of their benefit. So they would have probably wanted to pay into TRS for that $1,000, and they won't. So, and I know some systems have added additional local funding, either from CARES Act or their local property taxes to the bonus, so that it's like the system's paying for the property tax for you. Have somebody who just said they received $1,001, so they got an extra $1. I'm jealous. I got an extra penny.
Well, again, if there are discrepancies, it is, I'm assuming, because certain districts are taking taxes out Or
Yeah.
I understand in some districts, the taxes are taken out, but the district may be replenishing the difference in that check. So there could be differences in the amount that individuals get based on their district.
I think that,
And
Joe, I think that's what happened in the district, because I recognize the person watching us, she works in my district, and I think they added what they thought would be enough to the $1,000 to cover for what you would pay in taxes. And then of course it was almost exact. That wasn't an exact science.
how are you going to invest your penny?
I'm going to save it. You know, you always need a shiny new penny. So one thing that we're being asked about is the American Rescue Plan Act money, and what different kinds of things our districts can use that for. And the first thing we need to say is that 90% of that money is going to the local districts. And I pulled out my little sheet of paper that I had from before. 20% of it, the locals must use 20% of the money for disrupted learning. So I'm so glad they didn't say learning loss. They said disrupted learning. So everybody needs to be paying attention to summer school, etc. For 1% must be used for summer enrichment, and 1% must be used for after school, with and 5% must be used to address students' disruptive learning. So summer school, after school, additional opportunities, student mental health. So some more counselors would be a good thing. They could use this money.
Definitely need that.
And I think we would all agree that we need that. One thing they can use for anything that ESEA, Title I, IDEA for our special needs students. They can improve coordination to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. Students who are low income with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homeless, and youth in foster care. Training and professional development on sanitation. I think we need some more training and professional development on other things. Continuing to provide meals to all eligible students, technology for online learning, and they can also purchase more technology. There is a long list of things our systems can use this funding for, and we need to make sure that we do continue to monitor what's happening there with our school systems when they are getting this money, that they are using it for the things that our students need. I think I would put at the top of my list, let's use some of this money to decrease some of the class sizes. You know, the very best way we can help our students who have had disrupted learning would be for them to have a smaller class size and get more one-on-one attention from their teachers during the next year. Mm-hmm. And Joe, this money is not, they have a period of time to spend it, right?
You froze up there, Lisa. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. It looked to me like y'all were frozen. They have a period. They have a period of time to spend the money. They don't have to spend it all in this next school year, right?
I understand it's 2023, but I may be mistaken on that. Okay. And it's being distributed based on Title X funding. that pretty much everything, I think. Is that wrong? Am I wrong?
Title One.
Oh, Title One. I'm sorry, not Title 10. Title One funding. Is that the stuff that you're referring to? Is that in the NEA memo on
Mhm.
the bill?
It's in,
Maybe-
yeah, that's why I'm pulling back up.
Maybe
And
we should-
we've got people watching saying interventionists and tutors. Yes, they could use that. And mental health professionals are needed. I think we're all on that bandwagon. I think that's one of the things that is being completely overlooked. And Carly and Sharon, maybe y'all want to jump in and say what you're seeing, because our students are experiencing the stress just like everybody else is of dealing with the pandemic. I saw yesterday they were saying that there are 40,000 children in the United States who have lost a parent.
Oh, goodness.
And then my mind immediately went, if 40,000 children have lost a parent, how many, we know there's been over 500,000, there's 500,000 deaths in the United States. How many of those are grandparents?
Yeah.
How many of our students have lost a grandparent? How many
Yeah.
of our students have lost a neighbor? 40,000 children have lost a parent. So we really, more than ever, need those mental health professionals in our buildings.
I've had a lot of my students be so overwhelmed that they are just beside themselves. I mean, they want to go talk to the counselor because they're overwhelmed. And if they don't log in every single day and stay on top of their assignments, it is so fast for them to get behind.
Mhm.
And then that overwhelming feeling, it just becomes insurmountable to something that they just can't deal with it. And it's really something that we should always recognize, is that these students are dealing with something we haven't ever had to deal with. I mean, we're dealing with something we've never had to deal with, but when we went to school, we didn't have a situation like this.
Right.
So we don't know what it's like from the student perspective. We know we are overwhelmed, but the students are as well. And we've really got to recognize that those children need mental health professionals to be available to them to help with this situation. I mean, let's be honest, the teachers need it too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, it's overwhelming for all involved. So we definitely need to look at that and recognize that our students are feeling a lot of pressure and a lot of something they've never felt before.
Yeah.
So I do hope that the legislators and that the powers that be and our leaders in the schools are looking at that and taking that into account when they're spending this money from the COVID relief, so that they can get mental health professionals in the building to help our students. And of course, our teachers.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? I had one of my former counselors in my school. She used to do small group counseling with the kids. If they, a group of kids that had a similar issue, and, you'd bring them in and do lessons with them in a small group. I feel like everybody needs that. All the children need that. And then Sharon, we talk to each other here, but I feel like our colleagues need that too.
Absolutely.
Well, at my school,
Oh, I'm sorry.
the assistant principal has implemented this social media check-in, especially for our seniors, where she has a conversation with them one-on-one at least once a week. And she's also a young person, so she's into all of the social media platforms. So she has contact with our students, I would say with our seniors, at least once a week.
Yeah. Joe?
And they've lost out on so much. I think about our high school seniors and in last year's too, their prom, so many of the things that you do at the end of the year as a senior leading up to graduation, and graduation itself was disrupted. And now I know the seniors this year that were looking forward to all the things that they watched their peers miss out on. I feel so bad for the kids.
Yep. One of our people watching said that they've had 2 suicides at the high school in the past 6 weeks. And that's just,
Oh my goodness.
it's heartbreaking.
Very.
And what's even more heartbreaking to me is we have people who aren't paying attention to that for our kids. You know, we'll have to talk about this in a minute, Joe, but you know, we're still going to be giving those doggone standardized tests.
Well, I had a student who I gave an assignment to the whole class. And when I read her assignment, she put some things in there that were kind of concerning. And since she's an online student, I made sure I circled everything that was concerning to me in red and immediately sent it to the principal, the assistant principal, and the counselor. And they have weekly check-ins with her, not just her, but with her mother as well. And so I thought that was pretty good. And so when she contacted me, she said, I didn't know you were going to read that. Yes, that's why I gave you the assignment. I'm going to read it.
So I think that's something going forward we as educators are going to have to be very cognizant of, but we need others cognizant of that as well. And, you know, maybe we need a couple of years where, I don't know how many counselors y'all have in your schools, but I know in many of our schools, there's one counselor and there's 700 students. Maybe we need 3 or 4 counselors for a couple of years, because that's what our children need. And that's the other thing, Carla, you know, you were talking about that our kids thought by now everything would be back to normal and they would be having a normal end. Everything isn't going to be back. You know, it's going to take, it's not going to be 1 year to deal with all this. It's going to take 2 or 3 years probably for most of our students. You know, they always talk about when you're in that fight or flight mode and how you really don't comprehend what happened until, you know, you have that adrenaline crash and then you realize what happened to you. I don't think most of us are really going to begin to deal with what the pandemic has wrought until it is over. And that's when we'll realize what, because we're dealing with the stress. We're still in survival mode, and you can't really deal with the repercussions when you're still in survival mode.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Big chunk of that money going to mental health and counseling. That's good.
That's where we want it to go. So if you're a school board member watching us tonight, you've heard, and I think that's something that we all need to be talking to school board members about, that mental health is very important and that it be there for our students. So we didn't have any more questions.
I was going to suggest that while we're talking about federal money, that it might be a good time to talk about federal waivers and just give an update on that.
Yeah.
While we're in Washington, D.C.
So Georgia did receive the waiver for CCRPI. So CCRPI will not be calculated this year. But Georgia did not receive the waiver for standardized testing. So we are going to give all our students standardized tests. It does not count toward promotion and retention if they're 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade. It counts 0.01% toward their grade if they are in an end of course test class, which is basically 0 nothing. And we will not be doing CCRPI. So why are we giving the test?
And did they give a reason for why one waiver was granted and the other waiver wasn't?
Basically, they said that Georgia's application for the testing waiver did not clearly identify what made it unsafe to give the test.
We're in a pandemic and the coronavirus is still out there.
Yeah, well, so one of our people asked if parents have an option. Yes, parents have an option. And our state school superintendent, Dr. Richard Woods, has already said that children should not be required to report to school to take a test. If they have continued learning virtually, they should not be required to report to take the test. So if you are a parent, pretty simple, send an email, send a note. You're not sending a note because your child's not coming. I see how quick I said send a note. No, send an email, make a phone call, say my child is opting out of the standardized tests. And one of our people said it's silly to put the kids through more stress. It's silly to put the kids through it. And goodness knows that time would be better spent actually teaching the students. 3 weeks for standardized testing was what happened at my school. Okay, you're on a high. Why? Well, I'm not going to get a good answer to that. So that's where we are with those waivers. The testing waiver, however, did say, so here's why I'm saying parents, opt your kids out. The testing waiver said that if participation was abysmal, they would reconsider the waiver. So basically,
money is spent that we're paying for those tests that we could be using for school, not testing.
Yeah.
That's the part I don't understand. The money that is going to be spent taking that test. Oh my goodness.
I think it's 35 million that's in the budget for that kind of testing.
What we could do with $35 million is a whole heck of a lot more than take a test.
mm-hmm. Yep.
Now,
Lisa,
is
I'm
that
sorry, Sharon.
state standardized testing? I have a high schooler over here who's saying, ask her about AP testing. Ask her about AP testing. I don't think it covers AP testing.
No, that's for the Georgia milestones, end of course tests and end of grade tests. If you're in AP, you still need to study for that AP test so you can get that college credit. So AP, keep studying. Yes, Joe.
Is it possible for us to post the NEA analysis of the rescue plan on the website?
We can put, I don't feel comfortable doing it on the website, but we can put it in our e-news that will go out next week.
I think it was a great explanation, and I bet a lot of people want to see it and read it and look it over. Yeah.
The other thing I think we need to talk about quickly tonight, the GAERA, our representative assembly. Yes. Okay, here's the downer part about it. When we had our virtual representative assembly last June, did anybody ever think we'd be having another virtual representative assembly? No.
We thought when we left for spring break, we were going to come back in a couple of days. We were just going to be, we had no idea we were going to still be dealing with this a year later.
Yeah.
No idea.
We are having another virtual spring RA. So if you are in a local, your local president should have already submitted your delegates. If you are a delegate, you need to go to GAE.org GAE.org/springra, SPRINGRA. And then you're going to log in to the GAE website, and all the information is there. The agenda, everything we're going to be voting on. We have constitutional amendments. We have policy amendments. We have the legislative priorities for next year, and we have the budget for next year. So all of those things are on the website, and I will put the link in the comments. If you are a delegate, please go look, because you will be asked to vote on those. If you are not a delegate and you are a member and you still want to see all that stuff, please feel free to go there. And you can, if you are not a delegate, but you have a concern, you have a question about something, you can certainly reach out to Carly, Sharon, or me, and we will be happy to respond to you. And I'm going to tell you the easiest way. If you know our name, our GAE email is our first name dot last name at GAE.org. So if you have questions, concerns, reach out. But any member is certainly welcome to see all the information. And the other thing that will be happening, and so far we only have one, our GAE caucuses will be holding meetings this year, and any member can join a caucus. So far, the Democratic caucus has scheduled their meeting. So we have reached out, however, to all of the caucuses that we had before and their leadership, and said, please let us know when you would like, and we'll set you up a meeting. So if you're interested in those things, any member can be a member of a caucus, and every member is welcome to see all the information that our delegates will be voting on. So,
Lisa,
yeah.
other than the caucus meeting, can you tell us how this year's RA is going to be different from last year's RA?
There's no election this year. That's one thing that's different. And the other thing is we will actually be doing all that business. Last year we had election, but we had the budget, the election, and constitutional amendments. This year we will have all the normal business. We will have resolutions. We will have our legislative priorities, new business items if people want to submit them. And new business items are basically when our members tell us what they want us to do as GAE. And we will also be having constitutional amendments.
So this is a regular RA, it's just virtual.
It's a regular RA. It's just we're not going to be in person. And one thing that I was given some great advice by some other state presidents that have already done theirs virtually was to record everything we can record. And that will help us not have people with connection issues. So we'll have lots of things that will already be set. And
Okay.
so we can just kind of let people see it and play it through. So, Joe, let's talk about the state board and TRS. You told us we got the $1,000 state board meeting. Was there anything else there that we need to be concerned about moving forward?
In terms of legislation,
Mhm.
I'll mention a couple of bills that the retirement community might be interested in. House Bill 173 from Representative Tommy Benton, who was past chairman of retirement. The bill didn't really affect us. We were concerned about it because it could have been amended along the way in a way that could have affected us. But it applies primarily to the other state employee pension funds. There is specifically a line in this bill that says, regarding the investment in private investments, TRS can invest no more than 5%, which is the current law. So with regard to TRS, it simply re-expressed what is already the case in Georgia as of last year. I understand, but I don't speak for TRS, that their investing about 1% now. I might call it a pilot project. I'm not or a pilot program. But we've seen some of the other state retirement funds have pretty good return on investments with private equity funds. This is not investing in real estate, which I know our friends in Alabama have done a lot of investing in real estate. But we've got a lot of confidence in TRS and their investment team. Just in general, at the beginning of, let's see, 2019, I think the fund balance was about 78 million. It's now over 91, probably over 92 billion dollars. So during the whole COVID crisis, it took an initial dip, but it's actually rebounded terrifically. And our goal is to protect and keep people from monkeying with what we think is a really good thing. There was another retirement bill, House Bill 385. Some of you may remember it from last year. This is a bill that would allow retired teachers to return to the classroom full time. I'll describe the bill in a second, but the bill was not voted on this year. The chairman elected to send it to for a fiscal note, which means there'll be an audit to see how much it costs. I personally don't agree with that decision. I think there is no cost to the state, and I'll tell you why in the description. So the bill allows a retired teacher after 1 year in retirement to return to the classroom in the areas of the highest, in categories of teaching that are in the highest demand or the greatest shortage, I guess is another way to say it. So if you're in Coffee County, Georgia, and that district and that RESA is having a really difficult time finding chemistry teachers or Latin teachers or math teachers, this would open up for somebody in the community who is retired to fill that spot while drawing their TRS benefits. Now, the district, and apparently the school districts support this bill, would pay the employee's salary, the employer's TRS portion, and the employee's TRS portion. So clearly it would be a need for them to fill this. And I think there's some good stuff in the bill. There may be some details we need to work on there, but it will be back next year when the session meets in January of 2022. At the last board meeting of TRS, Dan Powers reports that there was really no new news reported there. The fund balance is basically what I reported earlier. Yeah, that's kind of retirement for now.
So,
and the good news, I guess, in some ways is that there really weren't a lot of teacher retirement bills filed this year, which means because many of them have to wait a year to be considered, which is, I think, unique to retirement bills, that there won't be a whole lot of mischief floating around retirement committees next year, I hope.
Whose bill was House Bill 385? Was that Shaw Blackman's?
Yes, it sure is Shaw Blackman's.
I thought it was. Okay.
okay. So something else we need to talk about, Joe. Mm-hmm. Census was in 2020, and we know they have to redraw the lines.
Right.
When's
so
that
every 10 years. Well, every 10 years, the census does a count of all Americans. The census was delayed a little bit this year because of litigation about whether non-citizens should be counted and all sorts of things like that. But eventually they got the census done. But I understand it was behind schedule, as I mentioned. So I'm told that Georgia will get the early census numbers in September or October timeframe, and give their redistricting committees in the House and Senate time to review that and draw maps and have a special session, I would think November or December at this point. So what happens is, based on the census data every year, the state is required to redraw congressional lines in state legislative districts because there's a shift in numbers, and a congressional district may have grown to exceed the threshold for one congressional district while another one shrunk. So they have to reconfigure it to to make up for the population shifts. And same for the legislative districts. In the end, it's a highly political process dominated by the party or parties that run the General Assembly, which in this case are the Republicans. So one would expect the Republicans to draw the most favorable lines for their party, which was what they've done before and what Democrats did when they were in charge. The difference now is it's a lot more litigious process. So I can say with a reasonable degree of comfort that there will be litigation over any plan that comes out. You know, I think that's just the reality of politics today. So we may have a special session in November, December with new districts in which members will run, and when I say members, I mean legislators and congressmen, will run in 2022. But there will be I would say, you know, there'll be litigation that will go before courts, and that could result in the change of the lines even further. In North Carolina, we've seen several times they've been to court, and the court throws out new maps, you know, and makes them go back and start all over again. And that could very well happen in Georgia too. So, but they should be in place by the 2022 elections, unless there's some judicial order that comes along and delays that, which I don't foresee that. But it's gotten to be a real science in terms of drawing maps, highly computerized. And it used to be they could kind of deal in census blocks. Now they do. I mean, they can take an individual household, draw a line around it, and you know, all sorts of funny things with the aid of computers. So Democrats will be drawing their own maps too, and I'm sure they'll be promoting those. But again, the party control almost always has their way on redistricting. Some have raised an idea that other states employ, and that is a nonpartisan commission to draw lines. I think that'd be terrific. But again, whether it's the Democrats in charge or Republicans, I don't see either one in Georgia being willing to give up that opportunity to craft lines that are most favorable for them. And I think some of those nonpartisan commissions in other states were the result of the judicial order. So, you know, I guess in that case, anything's possible. But so you may have a new district. You may in 2022, you may live in a different district than you live in now. And in 2022, after the election, you may have a different state representative, even if your current state representative is still in the General Assembly, because lines do change.
Yeah, I moved from the 7th congressional district to the 4th congressional district and didn't move an inch.
Yeah, exactly.
I was redistricted last time. So, and I think I've been every single time there's been a redrawing, my state rep has changed. So,
Lisa, in the closing minutes, I don't think I mentioned this, but shut me down if I did. The parental leave bill that passed, I think, is a pretty important piece of legislation. So I guess up until now, Georgia's never offered paid paternity leave for mothers and fathers, whether they're adopting a new child, have a new child in the family as a result of foster care or the birth of a baby. So Houston Gaines and Athens introduced a bill that would change that and provide 3 weeks paid paternal leave, which, you know, I'm sure if we were drafting the bill, we would have been more generous than 6 weeks. Seems to be kind of a standard number in a lot of places. But for starters, it's 3 weeks. And this applies to teachers and ESPs. So where in the past, I think our members had to rely almost completely on FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act. Now they have a 3 week paid option from the state. I'm not real clear on how that's going to be offered. I assume it'll be offered through the districts. It seemed like, or through the healthcare plan. So there's some details there we can fill in the blanks on going forward.
okay.
And so there may be some school districts, particularly in Metro Atlanta, that offer it. DeKalb or Fulton or Cobb, or Atlanta, no, I'm not sure, but it's a pretty big step. And again, not everything we would want, but I think something that's noteworthy. So start planning on having babies soon.
No, I don't think we're there. But one thing, Joe, that I think we do need to look at for our members, that a question that just when you talked about that popped into my brain. I know that we have in the past had members who were shocked that when they took maternity leave, under the current system where they had to use their sick leave and FMLA, that time did not count toward their retirement.
Yeah. Why is that?
Yeah, so I think we need to work on that. If we are going to have 3 weeks of paid paternal leave, and then, the member, if they're going to be on maternity leave for 6 weeks and they have 3 weeks of sick leave, if they're getting a check and they're paying into TRS all that time, it should count toward their TRS. So
That's a really good point. Yes.
So our time is almost up, y'all. Y'all believe that? So, I have to do the numbers of
No.
cases in children.
I thought you forgot.
No, I'm not going to forget that. And, Carly, I can't forget it because it seems like everybody else has forgotten our babies. And that's really how I feel like everybody's forgotten our babies. 97,204 today. Yeah.
It's still going up.
It's going up. It's not going up as fast. It's last week, this time was 96,305. So it's 899 this week. And that's the lowest it's been for a week in a very long time.
But what's scary about that is so many of our schools were on spring break last week, and the rest of our schools, it seems like, are on spring break this week. So
yeah,
have something to do with why the numbers didn't fluctuate as much, because I know this stuff is going on at the schools. It's being passed at the schools, as well as vacations and things that people are going on.
And that's what I'm worried about going forward, because I think, Sharon, you've had both shots of vaccine, right?
Yes.
Carly, have you had?
Get my second one on Monday.
Okay. I had my second one yesterday. Joe's had one. And I know the feeling of relief I had yesterday when I had that second shot. But then I had to stop myself and say, well, wait a minute. It's not gone. And our children aren't going to be vaccinated yet. So we still have to put your mask on, socially distance, wash your hands, stay home if you're sick. We've still got to deal with all of that.
And I remember when we were asking how many dead children is acceptable, and we said not one death of a child is acceptable. Yeah. And now we're at almost 97,000.
Sick, not deaths.
Okay.
Yeah, we're at 97,000 sick. Okay. But I remember too, you remember this time last year when everybody was all concerned because we had almost 100,000 cases in the country.
Mm-hmm.
We're almost at 100,000 children in Georgia.
Just in Georgia?
Yeah, yes. This is just in Georgia. So.
Okay, you succeeded. I'm depressed now.
Sorry, I didn't mean to depress everybody right here at the end. But I think the thing we have to use that to is let's keep doing the right things so we can get that number to stay lower, because we all want to be back in the classroom with all our kids and can hug them, and But we can't do that until we get rid of this virus. And the only way we're going to get rid of it is everybody getting vaccinated, wearing a mask until everybody's vaccinated, keeping our distance, and hopefully our students will be able to be vaccinated soon. So next week we will be back with Facebook Live again next Wednesday. And we have a very special guest that I can't announce yet because I haven't asked them to be here yet. But I promise you it will be wonderful. And thank you all for all you're doing for our students every day. And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.